I don't get paid enough for that.
Don't be a school board.
Hello all, it is 9 o'clock. We do have a quorum, so I'd like to call to order the March 4th meeting of the Town of Sunset Beach Planning Board. With that, shall we recite the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any comments in regard to the agenda?
I have,
Okay, yes, Pete, go ahead.
I have some items that I'd like to add to the agenda, or at least have the other members of the planning board consider adding to not so much this agenda, but future agenda items. And before we can add items to agendas, either now or in the future, we have to have a majority vote on it, because otherwise other things could be brought up that probably are not
It's under new business.
worthwhile in the town.
Are we doing that under 6.2?
Yeah, that's on the agenda.
That would be my suggestion, so I've seen a couple of different thoughts of items that individual members would like to have added as agenda items, and rather than deal with changes to the agenda that we have in front of us today, I would just suggest we have a discussion on these items under new business item 2, since all of them essentially are requests to discuss things.
Okay, all right,
as
fair enough, fair enough.
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is the number 2 item is today's agenda only,
Right.
Yes,
right?
that is
And
true.
then the number 6.2 is forward of today.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, approval of minutes from our January 7th meeting.
Do we have to vote on it?
Oh,
I make a motion
Motion
that we
to- oh,
accept
sorry.
the agenda as written.
Seconded.
all in favor?
Aye.
Consideration of approval of minutes from January 7th.
Public comment? Number 3.
Oh, gee. I'm sorry, yes. Public comments. Do we have public comments?
I believe so.
Do they have a microphone?
We have public comments? Okay.
This is Tyler Newman with Business Alliance for a Sound Economy. We work with organizations like the Brunswick County Association of Realtors and Brunswick County Home Builders Association. I wanted to speak specifically on the proposed lot size amendments for the MR3 district. We would strongly encourage you not to arbitrarily change the number above 7,500 square feet. Looking at the information in your packet, you can see that there are existing lots in this huge district that comprises, 40-something% of the town that fall within the spectrum of a lot of different square footages, and pegging a different number other than 75 will negatively impact some of those folks that fall below that number. But it's also not conducive as the market moves forward here. They're builders and developers that have the expertise, that they're meeting market demand. You can see other areas, the types of product that are getting onto the ground there. It's really what the market is demanding as far as lot size. It's also, you've got the environmental aspects, wetlands, stormwater, all the things that you have to put into a project. So just arbitrarily pegging a larger number for a lot size is going to have consequences both on existing taxpayers and investment moving forward. And I think the other part of it is people are so focused on 7,500 or 15,000 or whatever the number is. But in other parts of the town, even at the beach, you've got extremely small lots. So having a big argument or a big discussion about lot sizes and changing it one way or the other, or density of this or that, the core of the beach is already built on really small lots. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Morning, this is Bob Forrester, again, 110 Crooked Gully Circle. I'm addressing agenda item 1 under old business, Article 6, Section 6.06C, in two regards. First, I remind the board of the requirements of Chapter 10 of the Land Use Plan that any official land use or development-related decisions made by the town after the adoption of the Land Use Plan are expected to be consistent with the policy statements of Chapter 10, and any that are inconsistent must follow Policy 27, requiring a statement as to why those decisions which are inconsistent are necessary and in the community's interest, and how the negative impacts will be mitigated. In whatever recommendations the board decides to make to council regarding the MR3 zone district, I strongly advocate they include adoption into the UDO of the Land Use Policy Statement number 17, which opposes development of any type in the lands currently utilized as golf course fields of play, and specifically states that the only permitted uses shall be preserved open space, active and passive recreation uses, nature trails, and other uses compatible with the recreational open space. The second point that I wanted to make concern has been expressed about how lot size presently impacts the marketability of single-family lots and the impact of change on existing lots relative to nonconformity. I take substantial issue with, I know this is not a debate, but I take substantial issue with statements made by the preceding speaker as to marketability. I respectfully remind the board that the Birdwatch subdivision, which is located in the MR3 zone district, was submitted by the owner of virtually all of the undeveloped land in Sea Trail and was approved by this board in August of 2020. This subdivision consisted of 29 single-family lots, averaging 14,655 square feet, with the smallest being 9,131 square feet. In addition, an examination of the records of the Brunswick County Recorder of Deeds shows 64 lots in Sea Trail recently conveyed by one single developer in the last 4 years through February 23 of 2021 have an average lot area of 14,082 square feet. The developer obviously found them to be marketable and in demand. Regarding nonconformity, please follow with me for a moment. I respectfully point out that the language of the development standards for the MR3 zone district do not have any required minimum lot area for individual single-family lots, which could result in nonconformity for existing single-family lots. It clearly does for lots part of a project. What the language says is
15 seconds, Bob, please.
it imposes a mean lot area requirement on single-family projects, not on single-family lots. That language differs from the MR1, MR2, BR1, BR2, MH1, MH2, and R1 zone districts, which have a requirement for per dwelling or per building lot area. This MR3 is per project. And in any event, the language could be added regarding the question of nonconformity. Language could be added.
We're out of time, Bob, please.
Okay, as is in MH1, which says that the requirement, the minimum lot requirement, shall not apply to any lot of record as the adoption at the time of the adoption of the ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments? If not, we can move on to approval of the minutes. Starting with the January 7th package.
That was the one that I had the question about on page 6 at the bottom. approval consideration, and it said, is the parking adequate? And they said that does not meet the standards for parking, and I think that's incorrect. Page 6, down under 4, where it's Larkin and LaBruno.
We're talking about parking.
Yes.
And what is your objection? Sorry.
It said this project does not meet the standard for parking, and I think it does.
What
meet
project
Says it
was it?
does.
What project was it?
It was for Eastwood Bluff.
Yeah, I was staff was happy with the parking.
My copy says it does
It does meet.
meet the standard for parking.
Okay.
That's what my copy says.
What paragraph are we on? So
Okay.
We are
page here.
on the third from the bottom.
So.
Oh, it says it.
Your question, is parking adequate?
You know what? I misread it. I apologize. I misread it. Okay.
I remember asking the
Yeah.
question.
I withdraw.
All right.
I have a comment on the same page further up on it concerns, I guess, number 2, the Ocean Ridge parking facilities. The young man that was here, Jackson Starling. I believe like in between
Are
after.
we on page 6, Ron?
Page 6 of the packet, page 5 of the minutes.
Got it.
I believe part of my discussion with the young man there, Mr. Starling, in a traffic pattern was about adding signage for entrance and exit in and out so we don't back up cars onto the road. And I believe he committed to saying that they would add proper signage to, so it'd be after the Larkin comment, I think. Because I asked him about the pattern around the building there, and he explained what they expected, but I was concerned about people trying to back up because they couldn't get into that one direction and start backing up onto the road, and he said they would add proper signage. So people understood what was the route through the,
I remember you.
it's minutes, page 5, packet, page 6. So up at the top, after Mr. Larkin's comments, I had a discussion with the young man about the traffic pattern through the property there, because he had those 2 spots that were kind of like parallel parking on the building. And if there was cars there, you couldn't go the other way. You'd have to like back up, kind of like our lot over here. Yes, well, the way I recall it, and again, this is January now, is that when I asked him about it, he said, well, they would add proper signage so people knew which is the in and which is the out to give the proper pattern. Now, I don't know if we're going to enforce that, I guess, but he did say they would do that. At least that's what my scratchy notes say on a piece of paper.
Can we deal with this by saying that Cindy will go back and look at that part of the meeting again? Comments that were made regarding exit or entry signs by the developer? Before the meeting.
Okay, good.
Good point, Cindy, sorry.
I have one comment, Cindy, question, I guess. On packet page 5, item 2, about the 4th line down, it says this is an expansion improvement project. I think it's not an expansion improvement project, is it?
Thank you.
Chad, this was not a expansion project, was
Right,
it?
it's not an expansion project. That's
Yeah,
what
it's,
you've
it's
been-
merely just the parking. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because it would have
Then it would
taken a
have
whole
different
different,
set of standards.
yes.
We got the wrong word in there, but I'll change that.
Anyone else have anything? I'd like to make a motion for approving the draft agenda with those 2 changes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
February 4th. meeting minutes.
Ron, this is on page 2, packet page 12 of that packet, and it is on item number 2, fourth paragraph down, where Ron LeBruno is giving dimensions 75 by 150. Just probably a typo, but 75 times 150 does not equal 7,500. I think Ron was talking about 75 by 100, and the only reason I say that is I think the square footage is key to the statement. And anyway,
You're right, I missed that.
Cindy, did you see where that is? Okay.
Cindy, on package page 13, I guess the fourth comment down, where I was dealing with some potential recommendations about lot sizes. And where it says that we take an average between the largest and the smallest lots and create 12,000 square foot lot size. I was not looking at the largest. I was looking to the smaller side and taking something between the average that we have and the smallest lots. So maybe it should read take a value between the smallest lot sizes and the average lot sizes, or something to that effect.
I believe that's correct, Tom, because you did make the statement that you really needed to exclude the largers that offset, fairly offset the averages.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Cindy, I think you could probably state there, excluding outliers, essentially, we create results in a 12,000 square foot average lot size. Obviously, there's more discussion about that, but that sums up, I believe, the effect of the conversation. And that would be the fourth paragraph down after the semicolon.
Yeah.
I just had one last item on packet page 14, listing of future agenda items. At the end of the meeting, we had a discussion regarding a request that each of the planning board members submit to Chad their 5 top priority future agenda items. And my hope was that would be a way that Chad would be able to see what commonality there may be in our varying requests. Obviously, we can't send it to each other, but I just ask that we add something to that effect.
Yeah, I agree, Tom. In fact, that was the purpose of my additional items that I brought up before to run through the rest of the planning board. I sent a couple to Chad, but not all of them. So my fault.
So you just want something in there saying that members can email Chad a list of their ideas?
Board members were asked to provide to Chad their 5 future agenda items in priority order. From these lists, Chad can establish commonality. Anyone have anything else?
I'll make a motion that the agenda be accepted as amended.
I second.
The minutes,
I'm sorry, the minutes, excuse me, for February 4th, 2021.
second, civil.
Did we have
I
a
second, yes.
motion to second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item, under old business, Article 6, Section 6.06, C, MR3. Chad, would you like to open with something, or would you like me to?
Thank you, Chair, Board. we're bringing this back to you. This is part B of this MR3 discussion. If you didn't watch the meeting on Monday, the planning board notice, text amendment, and the MR3 or SUP both got approved
For
unanimously.
clarity, Chad, is it the same thing as you mean task two?
Task 2.
Task two, to be
Yeah,
clear.
if you remember January, the planning board notice was one text amendment. The other one was the MR3 task 1 for moving multifamily in all zoning districts to special use permits. This is essentially task 2 of that. We've decided, y'all decided as a board in the February meeting to move forward on looking at the density and going from there. So before you have in your packet, it probably looks a little similar at the front, but the attachments I've put in there, Wes and I got together and decided to bring to you attachments along with the non-conforming and clarified the average lot size. That is not what we're proposing that number should be. It is just taking all the lots in the MR3, Sea Trail, Jaguars Lair, and Sandpiper Bay. So I took those individually out, but also as a whole, and looked and computed an average of all the lots inside that zoning district, but also each subdivision. Essentially, I created you a bell curve. If you look at, and then the standard deviation is just your average away from the mean. You feel free to discuss. Wes and I are here for questions if you have anything on that as well.
Thank you. Just maybe start with the first of your attachments, attachment 1. It's a brief survey, but it tells us, not surprisingly, the larger the dwelling, the more expensive it's going to be. But I think based on this sampling at least, it said that there's not really any direct relationship between the size of the dwelling and the size of the lot. We have large and small dwellings going on small lots. We have large and small dwellings going on large lots. So that it's a limited sampling, but it's an interesting conclusion that you can draw from this.
Right, and I did want to point out, I think I put this in the text amendment or the staff report, that every one of these lots were taking out of golf communities. The source is from Zillow. It's a real estate listing online. They were taking out of golf, not just around this area, Ocean Ridge, Sea Trail, Sandpiper, but also St. James, Magnolia Greens, and I think Brunswick Forest was the other source that was looked at as well, maybe even Compass Point. All of those being within Brunswick County, not really particular to this area, but also the lifestyle with communities surrounding golf courses in Brunswick County.
We look at attachment 2, which is certainly an interesting one. I think from this we can come up with a pretty reasonable projection of the median, which I think you asked for last time, Pete. And it would say, I think, that the median is just over 13,000 square feet, slightly less than the average. 48.4% of the lots are at 13,000 square feet or less. Then our median is going to be just slightly ahead of that.
Yeah, this was an extremely important, I think, document, because it did allow us to see how many would be non-conforming.
Yeah.
If you got up to 13,000 square feet, it would be roughly half of the existing MR3 residence houses.
I tried to do it in increments of 125 square feet between, I think, 10 and 12,000, and then I went through. If there's a number in between I need to compute for you real quick, please let me know.
No, it's exhausting.
Yeah, no,
As is.
I think this probably provides the information we need. I mean, at the end of the last meeting, I was asked, if I had any thoughts in my mind as to where we would go, and I came up with a number somewhere in the 10,000 to 12,000 square foot range. And if we look at 10,000 square feet, we're looking at an almost 19% of the existing lots would be non-conforming. We went up to 12,000 square feet, would be in excess of 39%.
And again, if I may, Chairman, the difference between a non-conforming lot and a non-conforming use, there's a substantial difference there. Non-conforming lot can still be built on to those standard setbacks inside the MR3 zoning district.
Can you clarify that for the record? Please clarify that. I will ask. I don't want to lead you in a direction.
Yes, nonconformities relate to nonconforming structures, nonconforming uses, and also nonconforming lots, whether it be vacant or built upon. You know, depending on, and the key distinction is, I know of very few ordinances that have prohibitions on developing a nonconforming vacant lot. You know, build whatever you want in there so long as the use is permitted and so long as you're meeting setbacks. In some of our communities where we have extremely non-conforming lots, City of Southport is a good example, where in their old downtown district, they have 3,000 square foot lots. There's a further reduction in setback. But here, you know, if you're at a 7,500 square foot non-conforming vacant lot, typically you're going to be able to meet the setbacks with the structure you want to build, even if you were to increase the lot size per se. You know, we're not talking about, 3,000 square foot lots here and things that are severely constrained to setbacks. You have enough space to build your structure. And there is a provision, and we can get into this later, but, that we can discuss, that we initially discuss, potentially including in any amendment that you would move forward, that would rescind the combination requirement of common ownership. We can talk about that. That's
Can you
really,
indicate that might be unenforceable to a certain extent?
from my position, yes, and nor do I believe, and you guys are the planning board, I think you alluded to this, I don't believe this is something that you felt would be the position of the town to pursue something like
You're
this.
forcing
either.
somebody to combine the lots, pretty much, and that, to me, is not appropriate.
Yeah, that will be brought to you in April
Well-
for cleaning up as well.
Given that we initially said that, but given this can be included now if it's the pleasure of the board, but we'll get there when
We'll get to there.
We'll get there.
Yep.
So what are the group's thoughts?
I don't want to hog the.
Ron?
Well, for me, I'm okay with looking at these zoning districts, particularly MR3. I don't agree with changing the minimum lot size for a single-family home. No, well, first of all, would rename MR3 as mainland medium density. And I suggested some other changes here, but I'm not in favor of changing the minimum lot size for a single-family home. But I do suggest we look at changing the minimum lot size for duplexes. Matter of fact, the property we're looking at today is a prime example, because we classify a duplex as a single family. So I would be in favor of leaving the minimum lot size at 7,500 for the single family. As I stated before, in my mind, 7,500 square feet, 75 by 100, is a medium density neighborhood, not a high density. I agree, we're not interested in that. But I would be more inclined to, one, change paragraph A to a full acre, 43,560 square feet, leaving B the same at 7,500. I'm not sure about Bob's comment there about this project or lot size, whether that is a correct comment or not, and to what we're trying to achieve, and adding either in paragraph C or other size that duplexes require a quarter acre, 10,890 square feet. And then in conjunction of that, looking at E3,
I'm a little uncomfortable with the 5-foot setback to the side. Maybe Mr. Larkin can comment, because that 10 feet between homes or 10 feet between duplexes seems awful close for safety reasons. Whether that setback should be 7.5 or something. I'd almost like to hear from Pete on that. That seems awful close to me. And then I'm not sure how the math is done in paragraph I. I tried to figure that out on my own and I couldn't. So, but anyway, my basic position is I think MR3 should be retooled as medium density, which would conform to our land use plan in almost all the areas that are shown for medium density, including that large tract we all know we're looking at. But I don't believe we need to change the 7,500. I think history proves we don't need to change it because, again, that's a minimum. That's we see people have probably provided little bigger lots. But in the end, 7,500 at minimum, putting a 2,000 square foot house on a 7,500 square foot lot is medium density. I believe it conforms to what we want for land use. And I mean, it's great to look at the history, but history is past. I think we're trying to figure out where we want to go. And I think allowing some diversity of homes and construction is what we need. We have a lot of big houses on big lots. So to say that Sunset Beach is only going to be big houses on big lots is not appropriate for where we need to be in 10 or 15 years. We need some diversity of housing, which means maybe slightly smaller houses on slightly smaller houses. But I agree, we don't want high density, which means huge apartment buildings on small lots. But I believe a house on 7,500 square foot, a single family house, is medium density. I'm not as comfortable with a duplex on that size house. I would expand that to the 1/4 acre or about. And then look at that side setback. Seems a little tight to me, but it seems like somebody or folks have focused on one number here for some reason. If we don't like 7,500 square feet, why don't we just get rid of MR3 completely? We already have a 10,000 square feet, and we already have a 15,000 square foot in MR1 and 2. So we're going to make MR3, which is kind of our medium density one, less dense than MR2, or same as MR1. The whole thing doesn't make any sense to me. If we want some diversity, we have enough MR2, we have enough MR1. If we think we need some diversity, or maybe we don't think we need some diversity, then make MR3 the medium density area, and make the minimum standards at least appropriate for it. I don't know. I think we're off target because I think some folks are stuck on that number, or they have voters do, and they're stuck on that number. And they actually want something written in a certain way. If they want to write the ordinance, they go ahead and do it. But I think the town could use some diversity, as we talked about before, allowing people to age out of larger homes and larger properties into smaller homes and smaller properties. And again, as I said before, the message we're sending, if you don't want a big house on a big lot, go to Ocean Isle Beach, go to Calabash, go wherever, but don't stay here. So that's where I'm at.
All right.
Sorry.
Pete?
Ron brings up some good points, certainly, points that we're all interested in. I'll answer one of his first questions because he addressed me. I agree that a 5-foot setback between single-family dwellings is very restrictive, particularly if you put some landscaping in there at all. It impedes access and egress. It certainly affects firefighting, defensive firefighting for adjacent structures. However, that's not what we're here to talk about. It is what it is in the MR3 present listing. If we in fact do increase the lot size, if the board feels that it's in the best interest of the town and following the land use plan, then I certainly would be a proponent of changing some of the setbacks in the MR3 present UDO, increasing them. appropriately for an increase in lot size. The point that Ron brings up, it's certainly a valid point about diversity. I know I won't speak for everybody, I certainly feel that diversity is important for our town. Diversity is particularly, I think, important for people that want to downsize, that are getting up in years, that can no longer take care of a 15,000 square foot lot in Sea Trail, and want to stay here locally with their friends and need a smaller area. I do believe that the fact that we're allowing multi-units, however, under a different set of parameters, where it would need to be a special use permit, I think keeps the door open for achieving two goals. One, to have diversity, and I would think we all realize the importance of diversity, and at the same time to provide some control for the town to look at where the multifamily units are to be placed. When we look at the attachment that is in our packet, well, it's not an attachment, it's packet page 18 for today, and it talks about, it's an excerpt from our land use plan, under high density, then medium density, and it goes on. I believe that what the intent of I believe what the wording of the land use plan is clear to me, and I have reason to have participated in that land use plan drafting. It talks very clearly about that high density residential housing has very limited options. And it talks about existing multifamily residential developments that currently exist are classified as high density. I don't believe it was the intent in any way of the land use plan to broadly open up the town of Sunset Beach in the MR3 district to high density residential. However, I do appreciate the fact that I think it's confusing where it talks about MR3 as the applicable zoning classification, which would seem to imply that MR3 is open to high density throughout its footprint. And I don't believe that's the intent of the land use plan in any way. That being said, I am in favor of increasing the minimum lot size for MR3 going forward. The topic of non-conforming lots, I think, is very important for us to consider, because what I would not want to do in any way is trap the existing people in MR3 that would then possibly have an undersized lot. And in case there was a natural disaster, which we all can see can happen, fire, flood, and they had to rebuild, I think we need to be providing them additional time than is currently allowed in the UDO for them to reapply for permits, because there can be financial situations, there can be family situations that would maybe preclude people from responding immediately to rebuilding their house so they could come within that existing time frame, which I think is 18 months. I know there's a 6-month clause, there's an 18-month clause, but I think that needs to be expanded for these non-conforming lots that exist today. And again, I thought Ron brought up some very good talking points. Let me get back to my page so I don't miss any of them. In today's market, it appears from what has been happening at Birdwalk, is that the proper name for the Riptide development?
Birdwatch.
Birdwatch. Where Mr. Forrester highlighted just in public comments now that those lot sizes are in fact larger than the 7,500 minimum that would be required in this MR3 district. I can also see that the sanctuary that is in our ETJ, which is also in the MR3, those lot sizes are in fact generally larger than the 7,500 minimum that would be required, that is required by our existing MR3 UDO requirements. That's great. And I'm very pleasantly surprised to see that, because I think more open areas, the look, the scale of our town is important. What I wouldn't want to have happen is have a general shift in that by developers, and they would be allowed to, unless we change the lot size of MR3, to have that change. And I don't think any of us, there are some developments that are not within our town, but are extremely close to our town. In fact, those people that live there say they live in Sunset Beach, where the lot sizes are at 7,500 to 8,000 square feet. And when I drive through that area, and I do it often, I don't say it out loud, but I say it in my heart. I don't think I could live here. So those are my comments up to this point.
Cool.
I'm hearing things that really are making a lot of sense to me. I think you guys have really thought them through. You have done your background, and I'm leaning towards leaving it at 7,500.
As I looked through all the numbers and thought about all the numbers and thought about the communities behind the numbers, what really strikes me is it's not as much how big the lot size is, it's what's around the lot. And it made me even more concerned or more pro looking very hard at our green spaces, our open spaces, our golf courses. You can have a small lot size, you're looking at a golf course, you live in something that the neighborhood feels very big. So I think I'm less concerned now about the lot size than I am about preserving and making sure that we have lots of open green spaces. And that's, I think, part of what Sunset Beach has been. And I think that's maybe what we're seeing in some of our land use plan survey. You know, if you're looking out at a golf course,
Yeah.
you know, a small space between you and your neighbor doesn't matter as much.
And I can also say that in all of the houses we've owned, and we've had to travel, so I've never asked what was the lot size. It's been how I like the neighborhood, how I like the house.
So you're in favor of not changing the minimum lot size?
Or changing modestly, you know, it just raises other problems. I'm perhaps then more concerned about thinking about what the density is as far as multifamily and duplex and those kinds of units. They have a bigger impact.
I think we've already, I spoke without
Go
raising my
ahead.
hand. I think we've already addressed the multi-family
Yeah,
units
we did do
with
that.
the special use permit.
But the duplex.
Yes, but the single family and the duplex, and I know Ron's brought up some points about that duplexes should be treated, should possibly be adjusted where maybe not the single family. What I try to remind myself is that when I drive around my neighborhood or Sea Trail, particularly Sea Trail, which is MR3, when I drive around Oyster Bay, Oyster Point, which is MR3, I look and I say, I like this. But when you look at the minimum requirements for MR3, it happened to be that people that built at that time, and those were generally custom-built homes, individual people building their homes on the lots that they purchased. Developments nowadays are not that way as much. They are developers coming in and building homes in more rapid succession, and then people coming and buying that existing home. It's not custom. And there's a lot to be said to a developer doing that because they don't have to be worrying about a lot of little tweaky things that people want. They can build them quicker and faster with the same subcontractors. But for us to assume that that's going to stay with lot sizes like they have in Sea Trail right now, I think is wishful thinking. I would rather. I believe I have a responsibility to follow the land use plan and not just follow the history that's happened so far and assume that it's going to continue that way. Because I don't think in today's society it is going to.
And I think we see a lot of that in some of our neighboring communities, the smaller lots. large developments of smaller lots. I think back on, some of the information we heard from the respondents to the land use plan, that people would basically like the development that they see in front of us. And we know right now what they're looking at generally are larger sized lots. I'd be inclined to think in terms of increasing the minimum so that we ensure that we don't have the situation that Pete's, alluding to, where we have developers coming in and, just building on those bare minimum size lots. That's my opinion.
I believe if you, again, did another survey in addition to the significant survey that was done for the 2017 land use plan, I think you would get an overwhelming response from the citizens of Sunset Beach that larger lot sizes for the remaining areas that need to be developed above the 7,500 square feet would be what they would desire. Now, you can make the argument that, okay, I'm already here, shut the door to other people. And there certainly is that in human nature. However, the land use plan, I think, speaks clearly in the survey as to what the desires are of the taxpayers.
Yeah. And again, the land use plan says that large chunks of MR3 are medium density. Again, then somebody explained to me why 7,500 square foot is not medium density.
There is no definition, Ron, or a correlation between lot sizes
Well,
and density, in my mind anyway. Now, a 7,500 square foot lot, depending on how it's shaped, most of them are rectangular because there's little minimum frontage and longer front to back, so you can have a front and
Right.
backyard.
So at our setbacks now, which are up for discussion, a 7,500, you can probably, and maybe those guys can talk about it. I see no reason why you can't, with a nice look, put a 1,800 square foot house on a 75 foot by 100 lot with our 45% maximum coverage, stormwater requirements. And to me, in my mind, picturing that, that's medium density. That's not a house with forest around it. That's low density. That's not a bunch of row houses on a city street. That's high density. I mean, and then you open up the whole other can of worms. Okay, you change 7,500 to what? 9,000, 10,000. Now you have property rights too for people that have already purchased land under a certain set
Well,
of rules.
that we would address.
Right.
That's a whole
So
separate
you're in,
question.
and we're already, knowing that there was other land in this town that was already at 10,000 and 15,000. It just seems a bit that we're creating an issue that isn't really an issue in my mind a little bit, other than tuning up that thing to make it a true medium density, and then looking at the areas that apply and seeing if that's appropriate. But
I think to protect that too, Ron, MR3 under provision K has a very clear exceptions for setbacks that protect lots of record up to this point. That lots of record as of today, that it's talking here about an exemption for the 2007 town-initiated annexation. It was a method of protecting those people who had existing lots so that we weren't making those lots undevelopable to their liking as to what they originally had in mind. And I think we can have wording to protect it. Again,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just go back to the point that I think we have an obligation to have development follow in line with the general desires of our citizens that are reflected clearly, I think, in the land use plan.
And the capacity of our town. Capacity of the roads, capacity in general, capacity of the island to absorb all the people that are coming here.
A gentleman brought up a point in the public comments at the town council meeting on Monday night where he said, and it hit home, it's stuck in my brain. He said, what I don't like is is waiting for 2 cycles of the stoplight to get through it, even in the summertime. I know I come from an area where 2 cycles of the light was normal. That's not why I live here.
My area didn't have a light.
Oh, there you go.
Well, I think most people always look at the place they're living at the time they chose to live there. Okay, if you bought in 2010 or 2000 or 1965 here, you're saying, boy, I wish that never changed when I made that decision when I moved here. So, but that backward looking, I don't think is what your job is. I mean, is to look more forward to see what do we want it to look like. And we're setting minimum standards. That doesn't mean
They're going to build it.
that doesn't mean they're going to build it. If they can't sell it, they're not going to build it. But we want to adjust the minimum standard here to achieve, I think, we're looking at too much of what it is or was. So be it.
Well, I think we all appreciate the fact, or we wouldn't have put our hand up to be on the planning board,
Right.
that things are going to change. But that having the responsibility to be able to have controlled development and controlled expansion. We know that the population of Sunset Beach is not going to be 4,500 in 10 years. Every one of us knows that. However, being able to influence how that development goes so that the strain on our town staff, on our DPW, police, fire, road systems, all of our infrastructure is able to follow through with that. I think everybody has been overwhelmed by what has even happened in the last 12 months here in Sunset Beach with the building permits and the development expansion that goes on. People have said, where did this come from?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was waiting for the economy to catch up with
Yeah.
the fact that we are what we are.
Right.
And we haven't even seen the effect of that. You know, we have all these projects which have been approved on a sheet of paper, but in most of these projects, the first house hasn't even begun. You know, so where are we going to be just in the next 24 months? You know, we're going to see a whole lot more people here.
Right. And then from a holistic standpoint, changing MR3 doesn't mean we don't relook at some of the, again, I'm looking more at the big picture, is that doesn't mean things that are MR3 that we're done. If we make a change in MR3, well, I mean, I guess maybe some people, that's all they want. Make that change and done. When I'm looking at, well, maybe the next step is looking at rezoning some of that areas where we want, or not want.
But I think that's task 3 is
Right,
rezoning.
but I think they can't be kind of separated in mind, is that we talked about the golf course area, we're clearly looking at rezoning those golf holes to be whatever, AF1 we talked about originally, maybe there's another recreational one that's more appropriate, I'm open to that, but
I think we have to do things in steps. Otherwise,
yeah, but you have to have a holistic plan of where we're trying to get.
well, I think we have that.
Well, I think we have, somebody wants a number change, to tell everybody that they changed the number. Tell the voters that they've changed the numbers.
I think the land use plan is clear in my mind that high density is discouraged. And I think that is, and then that is clear. And so the next step is defining high density. And high density really is not defined except for, it's called multifamily. To me, density is impacted by multifamily, which we've addressed through the special use permit, which still allows multifamily. It just has to be conforming with the environment in which it's being placed. Lot size for MR3 We're not talking about MR1 or MR2. MR1 and MR2 are really already almost completely developed. There's very few vacant lots in MR1 and MR2 that can be developed. And most of the lots in MR1 and MR2 are already platted, whatever the right word would be. So there's not enough room for major subdivisions to go on within those MR1 and MR2. So MR3, I believe, is our focus, and rightly so, because it has the greatest impact, and really the only impact on the development.
Very specifically, that was the assignment we were given from our town council,
Right.
is to look at
So if my math is
MR3.
correct, our desired medium density is 5.8 units per acre. I'll let the mathematicians figure it out. How much square feet is that?
7,500.
We had
So
that.
we already have it defined. That 7,500 square feet is medium density. Is that 7,500, right?
I'm turning to that page.
It says that it's on packet page 19. Starts on page 18 at the bottom, medium density residential. And it says desired density, single family residential detached, 5.8 units per acre. Single family residential attached, 11.6 units per acre.
Yes, I see that.
So 5.8 is 7,500 square feet.
Yes,
So
that
we
is the
defined-
existing.
The land use plan defines minimum density as 7,500 square foot.
I don't know the math, but is that the math?
That's correct. At the time that was developed, that was the prevailing sense, that we were going to utilize the existing MR3. You'll see the single-family residential attached as a departure from the max density. And you'll also see in the implementation considerations and then obviously other policies, establishment of a new zoning district for single-family residential and or conditional standards and supplemental regulations to address this use. So Ron is correct. That 5.8 is set at that 7,500. There's plenty of things in the plan that you guys feel like you should agree with, and there's probably other things that you don't agree with. I think ultimately this is the type of discussion that you guys need to have before you figure out what it is that you want to proceed with. And I do agree with Pete and Ron also, the fact that, yes, you do have to look at the big picture, but I think figuring out if you guys want to move something forward regarding minimum lot size changes is probably the first order. And if you don't, that's fine. And then you can get into task 3.
Yeah, but we can do a change to MR3. Again, there's other changes to MR3 that may be appropriate without changing that particular line.
That's correct to me.
I agree with Ron. However, if I would agree, I would be leaning towards increasing the lot size of MR3, minimum lot size, but also changing some of the setbacks to be more appropriate with that.
I agree.
So I agree and disagree. I think they go hand in glove.
What do you think it should be changed to? How much of a change are you looking at?
Well, let me turn to my page because I wrote down after. Thanks for bearing with me here. I had, my initial thought was 10,000 square foot for the minimum lot size. which is still less than what has been brought forward to us has been the standard lot sizes for some of the newer developments, which are more in the 11,000 square foot range, such as the sanctuary right behind the ABC store and across from the library. And so obviously, if that developer felt that that was a reasonable lot size for their best bang for the buck, if you will, then increasing it to 10,000 would still keep it under that, not have prevented that from happening. Right now, MR2 has a 10,000 square foot lot size, and that has a 50-foot setback in front. I don't believe we need to go quite that far. Right now, MR3 with a 7,500 square foot lot has a 25-foot front setback. So somewhere between that range. Maybe the council may feel that 25 is still adequate. As far as I think one of the key things, and Ron brought this up first, and I concurred, that the side setback of 5 feet, which is allowed right now in MR3, if the lot size is increased, I believe that we would need to go to this, we should go to the same MR2, which is 10% of the lot width, which gives you, I think, a visual of the lot and the height over length ratio of the house versus lot that makes it appealing. And those lot sizes are going to be somewhere in the range of 80 foot wide, 85 foot wide, 90 foot wide. So that's going to provide instead of a 10 foot
yeah.
between houses, it would provide probably 12, 15, 16 foot between houses. Those were
Okay. Okay.
I also have a huge problem with the 35-foot, allowing somebody by increasing a setback to increase the height of their building. That's a totally separate topic for discussion.
Whereas last meeting, I was thinking in terms of a change in the 10 to 12,000 square foot range. I've kind of, and looking some of the additional information we've been provided, I was going to recommend a 10,000 square foot minimum.
So then we would only have an MR1 and an MR2.
No, there'd still be an MR3 because MR3 has other caveats associated with it that you'd still be able to do things in MR3, even though the lot size is increased. You can't do in MR2, even though the lot sizes are the same. There's different requirements. There's different other stipulations for development within those two areas. And I think that Tom brought up a very good point where he was talking about the average lot size in the town right now in MR3 is in the neighborhood of 13,000 square feet. And I think that's put a lot of us to sleep because we say MR3 has been fine so far. That's because the lot sizes are significantly greater as an average than as a median than the 7,500 square foot. And if we go to 10,000 square foot, that puts a little less than 20% of the existing lots that are platted as non-conforming. So I do believe strongly we need to deal with those 20% to protect them.
So what do we do next? Do we see if we can reach consensus on whether to change, and if so, change to what?
You could make a motion
And
to increase the
then
lot size and the
following that,
setback.
we can talk about some of these other things, such as nonconformance. Okay.
Yep. Well, you could also make a motion to leave it and recommend that to council.
Okay.
You can table it and address staff to bring you back with additional information.
Yeah,
I have so much information right
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Please don't.
It took Pete a couple of minutes to find it.
Or
Yeah.
you could table this and ultimately move on to task 3. Or
One thing I would like to be familiar with before I vote any which way is, okay, you're telling me it's still an MR3 because there are differences in an MR3 than there are in an MR2. I want to know what they are.
You can put multifamily developments within MR3, but you cannot within MR2.
Okay, that's one thing.
That's a pretty significant in the grand scheme
I
of
understand,
things.
yeah.
I'm not prepared to answer your
I
question. There
I-
are.
Yeah,
there are
what
different
I guess I'm
stipulations.
saying is I don't want to vote on anything until I'm aware of all the things it will affect.
You can, I have a table that puts them side by side. I probably didn't bring it today. I brought it today.
Oh, good.
So only single family is permitted in MR2 and MR1. And then so in your MR3, you've got single family, two family, and multifamily.
And, well, oh,
So
okay.
that,
Yeah, depending on, yeah, okay.
Depending on our jurisdiction, there are very nuanced differences in zoning districts. For example, in Boiling Spring Lakes, when they were still allowed to regulate minimum living area, all the dimensional requirements were the same, but they had one district, you had 1,500 square foot minimum size houses. In another district, it was 12,000 square foot, or 1,200 minimum square foot houses. So it's up to you guys, but I mean, there can be very minuscule differences between districts, or of course, very substantial differences. The range of uses in MR3 is what I, in my professional opinion, would consider to be a pretty substantial deviation from MR2 and MR1. The range of uses, meaning that you can put multifamily, duplex, and single family versus MR1 and MR2 is single family only.
Yeah, okay.
And the latest master site map is what it's labeled here for Sea Trail that Riptide has published. Very clearly shows areas that in their at least business plan that exists today, that they have multifamily at least planned, thought of, in 3 or 4 pretty good sized areas within MR3. And our existing code allows that to happen. That's why I think to make changes more than just the square footage or the setbacks, I think can get us a mountain in front of us that probably would certainly be unfair to developers.
Oh, that's gotta be in this.
Any other?
Well, when I was looking at the numbers, I was thinking in the terms of the 9,000, but I could certainly go to the 10,000. 9,000 is like 1 unit density difference, but 10,000, when you look at some of these, still reflects a lot of what we have.
I'd like to make a motion that we increase the minimum lot size in MR3 to 10,000 square feet. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Did you?
You're asking for an opposed? No.
No? Okay. So we have 4-1 approval of that?
Just to be clear, we're leaving the setbacks alone.
Well, let's go to
Are
packet
you making
page
a
23.
separate motion to that? Are you making a separate motion to that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep,
All right.
yep. And we've talked a good deal about nonconformity, and we know at 10,000 square foot minimum, we have more than 19% of the lots nonconforming. We're thinking of adding something to the effect to packet page 23, the section 6.06, for all lots in single-family dwellings which are existing as of would be the date that council might approve this. The non-conforming standards of section 8.06, non-conforming vacant lots shall not apply, and a building may be constructed or modified with the same standards that existed as of such and such a date. I then raise as a question do we need to create a new subsection in section 8, a conforming structure on a non-conforming lot? I don't think we have anything like that today. And then raise lastly the question about, good, come on, Wes, removal of 8.06, section B.
So, Mr. Chair, I looked at this, and this is sort of what I would recommend, that this be termed just Section 806, non-conforming lots
Okay,
specifically. And in this section, you can read it and you can pass this out for the remainders of the board. We get rid of the term vacant there, and then with that, you remove the combination requirement. Essentially, you're allowing, even if they're built upon and something happens to them, they can still build back within their setbacks. They would have had to meet setbacks prior anyways. Now, if you guys are discussing modifying setbacks, that's another non-conforming provision. That would be a non-conforming structure provision, and you would want to put some protections in there. But I think that's, the next item here. Right now, we're just talking about lots, and so you would want to clean up the non-conforming lot provision.
As a part of that non-conforming lot provision, Wes and Chad, I feel very strongly that the 5-foot side setback on a larger lot is not appropriate scale. I'd hate to see somebody on a larger lot push their house. And you see it happen all the time, where it's the side of the house that has no windows, so you don't care what you're sticking out, and you push that onto your neighbor. I would like to see, and I don't know how we do this. I was going to interrupt the motion before, but I didn't want to steal the momentum. But I would like to see a 10% lot width for the side setback to be in conformance, or at least be similar as to what MR2 is, what that same lot size is today.
And so that is where you get into, non-conforming structures as the setbacks are more problematic. So in the event, for example, say a house was built in the 70s, MR3. I'm just providing examples here. And they were built with a 5-foot setback, and you change it to 7.5. If you don't change, and we need to pull and just double check on your non-conforming provisions there, it's possible they would have to build back at that new setback requirement.
Even with the proviso that Tom read into the record for that motion?
Well, so what I would recommend is you add a separate clause under non-conforming structures that says, single family and duplex, structures of record are permitted to build back
To their prior setbacks.
Correct. Correct.
Be important.
Yep.
Well, first of all, we have to have consensus on the board that increasing that side setback is something that we feel is appropriate.
Correct.
I agree with that.
In terms of
I definitely do.
administration for staff and nonconformities, nonconforming as to setbacks are a bigger issue than nonconforming lots. I'm just providing that information to you. And nonconforming uses. The nonconforming lots, typically, as we alluded to earlier, folks can rebuild, just comply with your setbacks.
Because we're not affecting accessory structures or anything like that. We're talking about the main
The
structure,
principle.
the principal structure.
Yes, sir.
Pete, you can certainly make that motion if you feel necessary.
And would we do it as a separate motion?
Yeah, Wes and I, there's a consistency statement that's going to come to this. We'll clean all this up after
Okay.
we get through everything.
Tom, with your permission?
Absolutely.
I'd like to make a motion before the planning board that, in conjunction with the vote that we just had, that we change in our packet, page 23, under section 606 zoning district development standards for MR3 mainland multifamily residential district, that under paragraph E3, that we revise the side setback on a single-family dwelling from 5 feet to 10% of the lot width, which would be the same as MR2 states presently.
Mm-hmm.
Leave everything else the same.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 God, it's just ridiculous.
So I think what we're going to do is to
So I
make the
think
necessary changes, including the nonconformity statements, and bring that back next month.
is that the yes. We can clean all this up and bring it back to you next month if you want to move it on at this point.
I would prefer to do that. Is that all right with the group?
I'll go along with whatever. That's
So,
a housekeeping.
So okay, bring back everything as one for next month, and that is certainly we can do that. And
Is there a reason we can't just do it right now, or would
Okay.
you advise against that?
You can. What I would recommend, make a very clear motion that you're changing the minimum lot size to 10,000 square feet. And I did want to add, it may be advisable to under B, where it says minimum required mean lot area, to strictly say minimum required lot size. I believe that's, left to some interpretation. But not a requirement. That you're modifying that to 10,000 square feet, and that you're modifying the setback to 10% of lot width. Third item, rescinding the provision pertaining to combining of lots and establishing non-conforming lot provisions, not just vacant lot. And then the fourth is an exception for non-conforming structures for 1 and 2 family existing structures. So there's a lot.
Well, I think we all understand it all, but is there a reason to believe that it might be misinterpreted? Could we lose something in the translation by acting now? I mean, this is being videoed and it's being recorded, so.
No. I have confidence in the staff that we would be able to not miss anything and bring that to council if that's the pleasure of the
Good.
board.
I'm fine with that. Typically, I like to.
Do we need to vote on that?
I would make that motion with those 4 items, including adopting the consistency statement, so that they're all in one.
Can we just say what you said? We'd like to make a motion, what you said.
Sure, you can make a motion subject to staff's clarification.
Unless Tom,
I'm fine with that.
Cindy,
What about these previous motions?
the previous motions are fine. This is more of a clarifying item. Is there motions on the table currently?
No, they've been
Okay,
voted on.
okay.
No,
They've been voted on.
Okay.
well,
No, I'm just counting motions.
When I do the minutes, the motion was made for your statement.
Yes. But if no one has
Yes.
made that motion yet, though. Okay, unless Pete did.
no, Tom's chair.
But with the difference being, I guess they try, if we make this motion and go ahead, they write it and send it to council. And we don't get another look at it. Is that correct? If we
That would
make
be
a motion
potential.
saying,
Yes.
the
You're
2
probably
already
right.
went through, but we want them to include these 2 additional items and come back with a completed package at the next meeting for us to take one final, is that the difference? Do I understand that
Yes.
correct?
I think you're right.
Yep.
Is he right?
Yeah, but I mean, basically what we would be tasked with would be the non-conforming sections and adding the extra provision in there that has already been discussed. I mean, again, it's up to the pleasure of the board.
We could always go back and look at the record, look at the audio of this meeting and say,
We're talking about a month. Shouldn't we really look at the whole, I mean, okay, I'm okay either way, I guess.
well, I don't want
seems a
to
bit-
jump.
It
This
seems
is
like this
important.
non-conformity thing is a bit complicated and structures versus lots and it seems like writing it all down on a piece of paper and then finding out that something's maybe unclear and taking a second look
I
at the
mean-
whole ball of wax, so to speak. might be wise, but I could be had either
Yeah,
way.
this is something that Wes and I've been in communication with since January of making sure these provisions are in there. Ultimately, you're making a provision to protect the people on the lots. You're making a provision to protect the people on the use now because the increase of the setback, along with the extra provision that the homes that are built to current zoning ordinance standards will be able to be rebuilt in the event of an emergency, because we do see a various wide range of emergencies potentially in this area are protected as well.
What do you guys think?
I'm fine with that.
I'm comfortable. I am.
So I would like to make a motion that we recommend approval of a proposed amendment which changes on Section 6.06 zoning district development standards for MR3. Item B, changing the word lots area to lot size. We then increase the minimum square footage from 7,500 square feet to 10,000 square feet. That we revise item E3 from a dwelling distance between lots of or between a single family dwelling between building lot size increases from 5 feet to 10% of the lot width, and we make necessary changes to our nonconformity statements as Chad and Wes have already suggested.
And the consistency statement.
And those changes are then recommended. We would approve this proposed amendment to the Unified Development Ordinance and finds that it is one consistent with the town's comprehensive plan, the 2017 Town of Sunset Beach Land Use Plan, to allow a density modification in the MR3 zoning district, and finds, secondly, that it is in the public interest because the proposal is in accordance with the goals of citizens' arts as outlined in the 2017 land use plan.
With the adding of a word, average lot width, because lots are not always square or rectangular.
Mhm.
That is,
Okay.
MR2 is written, it's not the.
Does it say
lot
average or
width.
mean? I don't remember.
It's the average, I'm reading it here, it's the
Yeah.
average lot width.
Interesting math,
Yeah.
if it's that.
It doesn't do well with round lots.
You're right.
So,
So you have a motion.
So I have made that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
I
Aye.
have a question
Yes.
that just came to my mind and out of the blue. So if we change the lot size to 10,000 square feet, does that mean I can have a duplex built next to my house?
Sure. If you're an MR3,
If the Board of Adjustment approves it, yes.
no, duplexes are allowed,
I'm sorry, duplexes.
are permitted uses.
So I could have a duplex on the lot next door to my, if I lived,
In MR3,
okay.
I'm not sure you can't have it, right.
Because duplexes and single family have the same,
Well, it's a
They're-
permitted use
yes,
in the zoning chart.
but a duplex is the same as a single family
Right, but if you
in the
look at the,
definition.
here,
Okay, I think we're finished.
I agree.
Under old business, item 2, sidewalk discussion. Pete has, Chad?
Can I, real quick?
Sure.
I just want to clarify, March 19th, I think, is the last meeting that was had, or the February 2020 meeting, so a year ago, was the last planning board meeting that y'all had before we went into this COVID break.
That's right.
Okay. So March 19th would have been the meeting that would have heard this sidewalk text amendment. Am I correct on that?
Yeah.
Potentially.
Yeah,
Okay.
it was the time that we were going to be discussing it for the
So
first time.
a year later, I'm just requesting any commentary that happened building up to that point to what, and I got Pete's commentary, and if that really kind of,
I was going to send it to everybody, but that would
that's
have
fine.
broken the rules.
I can make,
so
I can definitely make a copy for everybody and enter that into the record with Cindy as well. If have a discussion if this was the intent of what Pete really kind of drew up here, and just kind of get some staff commentary as a board, because I think Pete was the only one not here. I think that was Mr. Eggert, if I'm not mistaken. So how y'all got to where you wanted to be, what you were trying to get out of that, and go from there.
Well, we're just seeing an increase in the number of subdivisions. We thought that, incorporating a sidewalk standard, a more definitive sidewalk standard than some of the bits and pieces that we currently had in the UDO was an important thing. Certainly within our subdivisions, we've defined landscaping requirements, tree canopies, all those sorts of things, and we just saw sidewalks as an integral part from an appearance point of view, and also from a safety point of view.
Okay. Yeah. Again, up to the pleasure of the board. I can, if it is the pleasure of the board, I can then take this document and work with it and come up with a potential text amendment to bring back forth to y'all for approval to council.
I added 2 items. Pete did a very nice job, and I appreciate that. I added an item G. I'll give you this. Truncated domes shall be installed on sidewalks at road crossings, commercial driveways, golf cart path crossings, and as deemed necessary by the town of Sunset Beach to ensure pedestrian safety. And in item H, sidewalks shall be designed to provide interconnectivity with adjoining neighborhoods where possible. And I don't know if where possible is what we want to say, but
Are the truncated domes, are they part of ADA compliance already?
They are when you enter.
Just at corners, intersections?
I think there's some stipulations of crosswalks. I'm not sure.
Because you already got in there ADA requirements.
I'll have to reach out to possibly do some researches to DOT, how that looks on there on public and town roads, of how we can work that out.
For truncated domes? Yeah, I mean, they can be required. Dustin requires those already. We would just clarify that it meets the Chapter 98 standards.
it's just a definitional statement. This is wet.
And I had not seen this prior. I don't know if you guys are still wanting to discuss more. The only issue that from an administrative standpoint, would be, using the where possible distinction, and the, I think that would leave some interpretation or some guidance for planning board. But the item F, I think you would be, it would be my advice to set a, when specifically, and I understand Pete's, I think I understand that provision. The problem is when the town's sitting across from, the applicant, yeah. And it is discretionary, so it's kind of a gray area. I would establish, if you guys want them on where we have worked with it, typically is in larger subdivisions. So, if you wanted to set a standard for, subdivisions or 50, collectively 50 or more lots, or whatever it may be, would be more advisable.
It's difficult to pinpoint it. Even the Muni code right now for Sunset Beach talks about if the lot is up to 80 feet wide, that you need a sidewalk. There may be situations, we're going to be dealing with one in a little bit here today, where the traffic at the end of a cul-de-sac might not warrant sidewalks at all, or sidewalks on both sides of the street. And,
sure.
and the lot size has, I think, not as much to do with it as the flow of traffic and where the walkway is going to. I also was trying to keep in mind with the Eastwood Bluffs sidewalks that were interior into the amenities area, what you don't want to do is discourage the developer from having those sidewalks for the benefit of the people. And up till then, we were only addressing safety and traffic flow with sidewalks. The Muni Code seems to really be focused on that as opposed to neighborhood interconnectivity like Tom just mentioned. And I think all those things are really an important part of sidewalks.
Would you like staff to include a provision based on the size of the development and then also add an internal circulation path requirement? I've seen it, in some ordinances we've written, particularly for commercial development, where there is, paths between the parking lot facilities, for example, or if it's more than one building on the site where there's multifamily, that there's connections between the two.
Or out to the dumpster or something.
Fine.
Yes.
What about stormwater? You talk about sloping, but,
Well, you don't want to make a sidewalk that puddles water because then it
well,
either freezes.
we don't want to prevent more drainage either, or we don't want to,
Pervious.
we're taking away land that would otherwise sop up our rains.
Good point.
So, are we ready to move towards the kind of thing they did on the island where they put in sidewalks that,
Impervious.
Well, they would be subject to the stormwater requirements, the 45% and the 2 inch of rainfall, whatever the hell it is now.
Correct.
So it would be part of their calculations, right?
And my worry with the impervious,
Well,
knowing what I do about it, I know it's significantly more expensive.
Yeah.
It also has to be maintained or it's not
so are
pervious.
floods.
It has to be
So-
groomed.
it has to be vacuumed.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, vacuum.
But I mean, it would be, if it was concrete, they would have to include it in their just like a driveway.
Correct.
Yeah.
So,
Noel brings up a good point, though, about stormwater. I was so general in my grading the drain towards the street. Maybe there does need, with you guys, can maybe wordsmanship where it talks about a 1/4 inch per foot sloping.
I can work with Dustin, and I can, even when we bring this back to you, I can bring him here to address any comments that we might have.
You don't want velocity, but
Yeah.
you don't want water standing on the sidewalk.
Yeah, I have 2 great resources, being Dustin, our public works director, but also Matt, our stormwater engineer who replaced John Michaud. I can provide them with before you to answer any questions that we might have on that as well. I mean, the minimum would be, how it's worded in the Chapter 98 with 3,000 PSI to a certain amount of depth and all that. Also, that's the minimum. They're always welcome to go above that to do impervious. That's always an option.
Yeah,
More
that's why I said
costly.
alternate materials are
Correct.
allowed for the.
Correct. And certainly, if Mr. LaBruno, if they get to the point where they're over that BUA or impervious percentage, they can certainly, it's like, we still want to do sidewalks. Impervious services will be an option because it cuts down on what they want to do. So,
Okay. Thank you, Pete, for providing a very good starting point, and I'm sure Chad can see some opportunities to build on it, and we'll have
I know
something to come
that
back.
April, and we can get into a little bit more of this later to what we might see in April, but no, April's shaping up to be potentially a busier meeting. Certainly not the one to go to 3:00, but we do have some stuff that is, I'm waiting on some further information from applicants that would bring you a little bit more of an increase of development project approvals in April than we've seen in the past couple months. So.
Good.
And one of my points for a future agenda item, maybe the next meeting, will be right on line with that. So
right.
I'm glad you said that.
Okay, next item under new business, Sunset Ridge Phase 2 final plat.
let's see, we're creating 2 more non-conforming lots. And probably some non-conforming
This
structures.
just,
They've already, the plots, it's already plotted though.
So, you know, Paramount, if you remember Sunset Ridge Phase 1, this is the second part of that Phase 2 where they're finishing this. They're bringing forth back the requesting final plat approval for Phase 2 of Sunset Ridge. The final plat approval will grant permission of construction operation of 18 lots in Sunset Ridge subdivision. Subject property is it's there. I do have the applicant right here. I think I also provided y'all with a bigger set of plans this time, where hopefully y'all found those readable. And if you have any questions for me, staff, also with Mr. Weaver here with Bill Clark Holmes, the one thing I do want to point out is that everything has been satisfied, including the roadways, with staff on this project. So.
And there was a problem with the road across the road last time, right?
Yes.
But this road is okay, right?
Well, the other one was okay too.
There was, excuse me,
wanted
there
to
was
let that go
questions,
by.
there were
questions and concerns.
that we satisfied, correct?
Right,
Correct.
okay, but this one doesn't have that questions or
We,
concerns.
we did, we put more asphalt than what was required on the approved, plans. Yes, to meet the UDO, yes.
Just for the record, there's been at least in my mind, a confusion as to what's Phase 1 and what's Phase 2. And I don't know if they've been commingled. What we talked about the last time, which would be on the south side of Ascension, Campanella Court, I guess it's called. Is that Phase 1?
Yes. And there was a typo in my staff report. It should have said Phase 2. Preliminary plat brought this overall to you as the whole entire thing.
Okay.
Bill Clark, Paramount, Mr. Weaver decided to phase it out into 2 and bring 2 separate final plats to you.
And it was just sheerly because of completing the project at different times.
I just didn't want the record to be misconstrued. It's,
Yes.
So the road question has been answered? Everybody's happy with
Dustin,
that? Okay.
Dustin Graham, on behalf of Dustin with
Okay.
Public Works, he's satisfied.
Sidewalks are bonded?
Correct.
Is there any landscaping that's going to be done between this construction and the single-family homes behind it?
There is a landscaping plan, in the approved, drawings with the town. But there will more than likely be supplemental plantings as well.
Okay.
We just haven't nailed that down, but there will be supplemental planting.
yeah, I have some confusion as to what this is called, what plan we have right now. This subdivision only requires a minor site plan approval. Is that correct? It doesn't require a major site plan approval?
The preliminary plat needed a major site plan approval, which subdivision approval.
Yes.
Sorry, so no, it does not need a major
Okay, so what are we looking at? Is
You were-
this,
Final plat.
final plat.
okay? So are there other documents that, I know that the UDO administrator has the authority to waive certain requirements in here, such as a landscape plan,
I think I see the distinction. So site plan approval is a different thing than subdivision approval. Site plan approval is, for example, we had Eastwood Bluffs. That's just on one piece of property. There's landscaping, there's other things that are involved.
Okay.
This is a project to divide the land into individual lots. There's a preliminary plat that's approved, shows all the infrastructure they're going to include, including any landscaping that was, this preliminary plat was approved, what, 2 years ago, a year and a half, something like that?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago.
So Pete, you're being brought in on kind of the last
second
2
piece
phases
of
of
it.
it.
Where they've got all their infrastructure in, so that they're ready to take this to the Register of Deeds to record and then convey lots and then pull building permits, whoever it is, to construct the units.
All right,
that's a good
that
question.
answers a huge question for me because there was a whole bunch of things that I'm saying, why aren't we being provided access to it?
Yeah.
And it's, I see.
Article 13 versus the Article
Article
5
5.
for site plan.
Okay.
More of a formality at this point, making sure that we completed what was approved originally.
What I see on the drawing, it isn't labeled, but it's by the legend, it is referring to it as a sidewalk that would go from the cul-de-sac, the round cul-de-sac area, out to Bonaventure Street. That is we'll call it a interconnectivity of the neighborhood sidewalk, is that?
Correct, and the mail kiosk location is up in that cul-de-sac as well.
Okay.
So
I see. Okay.
it gives pedestrian access
They need to get
for
there.
folks to get out of their home, go walk, and get their mail and come
Get their
back, so
mail
they don't
back.
have to drive around if they don't want to.
Makes good sense.
Yes, sir.
And I do assume that, I mean, I liked the area of your roadway. You made it so different than the
Yeah.
southern area, where the southern area is one roadway going to a very large cul-de-sac, all pavement.
Right.
And this one has narrow in and out that are arrowed for direction. of traffic.
We had some constraints on that. We wanted to actually do that on the phase 1 as well, because it's just a nice look with that median, but we were constrained on space and fitting everything in with the step-backs.
Making the lots work.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And I could see that.
Yeah, and we're gonna have nice plantings in there. We're gonna have it, sod and beds and different things like that, so it'll look very nice when it's completed.
Yeah. I thought it was nice.
Pete, I see your confusion. That should say major site subdivision. So that is, you can put that on me, please.
Okay. I'm easily confused, so.
I don't need to, yeah.
Anyone else?
Any reason 9 and 17 got cheated on land?
We've got site specific. We've got site specific units that are going on here, so we wanted to diversify that. Those aren't listed on there, but we have some internal mapping that we did to offer customers certain units with certain footprints on lots, and that's just how it ended up working to get a little more diverse product, so it's not the same all the way through.
It was just adding 2 more non-conforming lots, but that's okay.
The question, maybe not for the record, has this already been platted? So these lots have been approved? I'm looking at what we just did. We just changed the 10,000 to 10,000 square foot for MR3. This is MR3.
Correct.
This is already caveated in.
They would not, well, you guys haven't changed anything. It hadn't become official until council.
Countable.
But even if, say you, by virtue of your action, did,
Yeah.
they already have preliminary plat. They're already vested with their approval, not only from preliminary plat, but they submitted their final plat prior to your action, so that
Okay.
ultimately these will become, non-conforming lots. But if
But
you
we're not
include,
preventing this from moving forward.
Correct.
that's correct. Yes.
Just like the sanctuary,
Yes.
investing.
Yes.
Yeah. True. Okay. That's right. You guys are doing that too.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have any questions?
No, I had a bunch of questions on landscaping, but never mind.
We'll make it look nice.
No further questions? Motion to approve it?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, board.
Thank you.
I'll be in touch with you, Rob,
Rob.
with Paramount needs to get me an updated Mylar to sign. So I'll get with you and him this afternoon to get that ASAP. Right. Thanks, Lane.
Thank you. Okay, next item under new business, listing of future agenda items. I think we know task 3 becomes our next agenda item. Guess we're going to chat about what's beyond that. I guess the question I have, we're starting to see a number of members coming up with lists of things that they'd like to do, and how do we wrap our arms around it and establish some priorities? when everyone's not even privy to what others have submitted.
I've gotten out of the 5, I've gotten 3 out of the 5. And I need to take a look at them in the light of the MR3 stuff, moving to council, some other things that are taking up my time. Starting to put together that list. It might be May or June before we start really seeing some of those future agenda items come down the board. Like I said, April, we are I anticipate the sanctuary amenity site potentially coming before you. Goals Landing. There is another multifamily project that has been submitted by Riptide Builders on the Sawmill Townhomes, the completion of that project, phase 1 and phase 3. We did have TRC on that yesterday. And some potential other projects that are anticipated. So, like I said, those are up to the applicant to get those comments back to me as far as addressing the TRC to be ready to be brought before y'all. But I know that one Goals Landing got moved to potentially, instead of this meeting, they delayed getting their comments back to me to potentially next Friday or the Friday after. So again, I know we wanted to, the other thing is Wes and I've talked about cleaning up the special use permit.
Well, and Tom had a comment about that. I mean, I think the primary gist is you guys have had more development, complicated development than you've had in a long time. I think we would all admit that. Subdivisions, unfortunately, are fairly complicated. Not only that, there's some other things that are going on behind the scenes that are taking up a bunch of staff's time. I think it's staff's intent to obviously bring forth task 3 to you in April. And that's a fairly, there's going to be a complex item.
Can I ask a question about that, though?
Yes.
If I don't know when town council is going to act on what we just did, task 2.
Potentially, if we're going off of
They're not going to do it at the next meeting.
it would be January, February, March, so it would be May that they would hear that.
So for us to start on it in April, task 3, is that a little premature? If we don't know what council is going to do on task 2, do we want to move forward on task 3 in advance of that?
But what I've heard repeatedly from council is protection of golf courses.
Correct.
I don't see a reason in the world why we don't start looking at that,
Correct.
irregardless of what might happen.
The other thing that overall abroad, and again, I'll mention this briefly, this is another reason moving to 1 meeting a month, because we're about to get really busy, is that I am budgeting $60,000, potentially $30,000 out of the next year's budget, and then $30,000 additionally out of the following year of doing an audit on the UDO, potentially maybe looking at the land use plan, but at least doing an audit on the UDO and fixing it and doing a Band-Aid look at it.
You're talking about a third-party audit, not an internal audit.
No, third party, correct. He's probably sitting next to me.
Yeah.
Well,
Potentially.
I was just going to congratulate Wes.
Well, look, I take no pleasure in taking that task on, and nor am I looking forward to doing something to that effect. But that's down the road. I think what we're getting at is that it sounds like sidewalks and the rezoning are items that will be on your agenda, I think, for April, in concert with a host of development approvals.
Yeah.
And then I think, Chad, maybe you need to certainly have a list, I think, compiled of all the other things that are out there for discussion, perhaps in April.
Yes.
Is that?
My point is, though, isn't it premature for us to talk about rezoning?
I think we already,
In April.
not necessarily potentially sending something to council, but we need to go ahead and start laying the preliminary work, because this one's going to be a little bit more tougher, and I guess if that's the right word, than the other 2 tasks that we just got through hearing on. Rezoning is a complicated process. It is not a short one. So we need to go ahead and start laying the foundation work for that, at least start having discussions to work towards something to bring to council.
So where we are starting this meeting, I must admit I probably overshot the project. I was supposed to only do the top 5, and I did a top 12. So be it.
Give us
But
your
do
best
I?
5.
But do I need? And I'm happy to do now. Make a motion that to enter this into my list into the record so it can be distributed.
I have it. I mean, I can distribute it. I can
Well, I
blind
mean, like
cart.
right now.
I can. I mean, if you want to, sure.
I mean, and then I'd also like to enter a motion to add an item because there's an item on my list that technically doesn't show up anywhere.
Okay.
So is the correct procedure, so I need to make 2 motions. Would that be correct? A motion to add an agenda item for future dating,
Mm-hmm.
not to approve the item,
Okay.
to make it a possible agenda, or, so I guess I need to do that first, and then in a motion to enter my list into the record so I can distribute that.
I wouldn't say you need to list the motion into the record. What I can do is I've got your list. I've got 2 others. I'm going to send an email out to the planning board as a whole, asking for your list back. And what I can do is bring that list back to you in April, showing what a majority of what everybody.
That way we can see,
That's
we can see
what I would hope.
duplications. and-
Correct. Yes.
So,
But Mr. LeBruno, if you have something specific that you want to enter into,
well, yes.
Yes.
Because one of my items on my list is not on any other list, so.
That's fine.
I
You
need to
can-
enter a motion to.
yeah,
So I'd
just do
like to
that
enter a
one.
motion to add to the list of possible agenda items. I got paperwork here, if Cindy wants to pass it around, I don't know if there's additional copies. Basically, all it does is up for discussion of dividing up the multifamily definition into 2 definitions of a large and small, with the division being 12, such that smaller units can be permitted uses and larger units remain as special, whatever we call it. I forget what it's called. Special use.
Special use.
And again, that's just adding the item to the list of items to be considered for the agenda, not approving the item.
And you can certainly pass that out.
There's copies.
Yeah, I have copies as well if you want me to do that. And I just need to get one to send
Either
you.
way, what's the legal way? So
let's-
I'm asking to add that to the list, a motion to add that to the list for discussion, on the agenda. I don't know what the correct word is.
I think what needs to happen is Chad and Cindy sit down and get this full list of everybody's together in no priority order. And I think even perhaps before next meeting, just send that out to folks. And so everybody can know, including, like this item, and probably in April, if there's time, start figuring out, and Mr. Chairman, obviously jump in here, the priority of that of that large list.
Aren't we supposed to put them in the priority we?
You would like, put them
collective.
in your priority,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you'll do that, what I'll do is I'll provide a list back to y'all, alphabetical, numbered, no
Why
priority
don't you
order.
just,
And I will
I don't
send,
want to make a suggestion, but why don't you just score the list?
yeah, and I'll do
If you
that.
just give a score to a reverse number and then put it in a spreadsheet,
Yep,
then
absolutely.
you can order it properly.
Yes, I'll do that. And then what I'll do is I'll send that out to y'all individually as soon as I have that whole entire list.
It was my understanding, and please tell me I'm right or wrong, is that if a planning board member were to bring a topic forward for future discussion, consideration, that board member should be prepared to champion that task.
That's right.
Correct.
In other words, quarterback it. Maybe it's not something that they have 100% expertise in, but they need to be, I assume, they would need to be willing to quarterback that through. And because it's something that they feel is important to
Correct.
progress.
Yes.
Because if I just tell you I want to talk about global ice flows, what are you going to do about that?
Also, if I can make the more, just ask, and that would, as you do that, I have no problem with planning board taking on the task, also giving staff time to research and where it pertains in the UDO and how it can apply to
Well,
the
there may be
UDO.
some things very clearly that you immediately can look at and say, we don't have the legal right to do this.
Yeah.
So,
Correct.
Yeah.
it maybe tell that individual planning board member that as the reason why it's not listed. But I'd like to see on the list which one of the planning board members is in fact bringing that topic forward.
Yes, I agree in that. So whatever table you guys put together, it'll have a column for the rep's name.
All right, we have two things right now on the agenda for April. Can I offer some other things? Tom? Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, sure.
I've brought up before about the 35-foot maximum building height, and I certainly don't mean to say that that can't happen anywhere. There are some areas where it's more appropriate than others, such as MB1, MB2, business concerns, and also our mud district, because there's some certain advantages to going above 35 feet. And those need to be brought forward and justified, if you will. But I think in MR1, MR2, MR3 in particular, that it is something that I'd like to see us not happen. It's worked very well on the beach, where the beach does not allow anything above 35 feet. I know that developers will bring up reasons, and I will personally try to meet with builders to get their background on this. But we certainly don't want flat roofs. We want gabled, peaked roofs. We want that architectural look. We don't want everything looking like the roof of Food Lion. And but I would like to bring that forward. And it may not need to be in April, but it'll be on my list I send to you. I'm bringing this out to people because I'd like to get the temperature of the board as to what they feel about it. There's no sense in me pushing a rope that is not going to go anywhere. You mentioned there was a technical review meeting this week. I would like to have town staff, have the UDO administrator at least, entertain having planning board allowed at technical review meetings to be silent spectators, but to be there and allowed into the setting. It would give me, I think, a great advantage, give the planning board a great advantage to know what is coming before us, and to also know the discussions that have already taken place, so we don't try to reinvent the wheel sitting here with our commentary, with our deliberation. But I would like to have the UDO administrator consider allowing, on a volunteer basis, if they not saying we have to go, but if we want to go, and I realize there's open meeting requirements, because that's a closed meeting, so that no more than two of us could, in fact, attend.
There was a time where two of us were assigned to the technical review committee, and maybe you remember why that was changed, but it had something to do with advertising, if I remember correctly.
Well, I'm sure we can determine amongst ourselves to keep it to no more than two. But it would give, I think, us a great advantage to be able to sit in on that.
Either no more than two, or officially as the board elects somebody to attend those meetings.
Right. I would also like to add to a future agenda item, and I'm kind of looking for some support from the board on our sister development community here in Sea Trail has a ordinance that is very successful at limiting or restricting, prohibiting parking trailers for more than a set amount of time in your driveway, abandoned vehicles, commercial vehicles being parked on your grass and sitting there for weeks. iPods and things like that are in fact allowed with special advance notice by the town for a certain predetermined amount of period. I know on my street, everybody on the other side of my street, across the street from me, lives in Sea Trail. I do not live in Sea Trail. There is such a significant difference in the look. We have one house that has 6 trailers, either mobile homes, campers, boat trailers, abandoned or not with a boat on them, without a boat on them. Well, they own both. I won't go there. I don't want to editorialize, but good point. I also noticed that people in our town will park a boat on the side of the house that they don't, or a trailer on the side of the house that they don't have to look at every day. But their next door neighbor does. and there's nothing that next door neighbor can do.
I agree with Pete fully. I mean, I think when we were writing the UDO, this came up, and I think at that time it was identified to be a general regulation kind of issue.
I would think
Not
it'd be outside
necessarily-
the purview
not
of the
a,
planning board. It would be an
UDO.
ordinance that the town could take up
Yeah.
as, just like the nuisance ordinance on vegetation growth.
There is nuisance on junked and abandoned vehicles, trailers,
Right.
boats, et cetera, can fall into those. That's under the general code,
It's weak.
but
You can't
not
enforce it.
compliant to the ETJ. There is, you can have, this is obviously subject to, at your discretion, items in the UDO restricting the storage of things on single family properties. It is it's not something to take lightly, particularly from an enforcement standpoint. Communities that I have seen that have pursued it, some have pursued them to some degree of success. Many others, it has turned into a big issue.
Is there a difference because they have an HOA?
Well, oftentimes they let the HOA handle it. In the local government themselves don't get into enforcement. The ones that have been able to do this in some sort of successful fashion is it have regulated these on vacant lots per se. Platted vacant lots where even if it is next door to your property, but someone's putting the 6, 7, whatever trailers on there. The folks that have issues are where you're regulating, the placement of boats and so forth on just a standard single family lot. That's not to say that you guys cannot pursue this. The issue becomes enforcement, and what results in, unfortunately, the town getting into neighborly conflicts. Because I don't like my neighbor Jim, and So, and I'm just saying this as out of experience from dealing precisely with this, and I'm not trying to profess to either side. I'm just providing my.
But it still seems to me this is an ordinance that should be, I mean, the town can take this up. I just don't know why.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting
I don't
that
think
you
it should
can't.
be here as a planning board thing. I don't see how it could be even, but.
You can regulate it as zoning, but there's also general code nuisance ordinance
Well,
that.
who enforces the?
Yes, there is, and you have.
That's,
But I'm
that's
not
correct.
talking about
That's
that.
a different thing.
Yeah.
I think I'm talking about what you're talking about. Okay.
What I'm saying, though, if you can do that, why can't you say, well, you can't keep an iPod sitting in your driveway for 6, 8 months?
Well, you can you can if there's a specific use that you've applied for that to be
You
there.
can have it
Like
for
you have to
like
be doing-
9 months?
The town is going to see what's fair and reasonable based upon the amount of renovations you're having done, because the renovations are in fact benefiting your other neighbors as well. So there's a give and take in that. But that's a different situation. There are narrow windows of things that you are allowed to do with special permission.
And running businesses out of a home?
But not leave a camping trailer parked in your driveway forever.
Yes, I know.
So
Well, I guess I don't object to most of that, but to me, it's not a planning board thing. It's
Yeah.
a town council thing. If they want to take up an ordinance, just like, and they have a code enforcement officer that comes around and enforces it with citations and letters, that's the place it should be brought up, and the town council can take it up. I just don't see why just like any other nuisance, I mean,
where can a citizen move forward on something like this, or is that not something we can take up on our agenda here?
So if there is a formal nuisance complaint, it can be filed with the town. If there is a contention that there is in fact an abandoned or junked vehicle meeting the requirements of the code of ordinances, you can file a written complaint. And I don't have your ordinance in front of me, but most of them say you can file a written complaint.
That's not the point I'm trying to make, though. It's,
Would it make
But
sense?
if you want to establish a zoning usage issue, meaning on a single family property, we only want to allow one trailer or whatever, or no trailers forward or the front of the house, similar to how you would regulate accessory structures. This is something you
Similar
can
to the
take
way
it-
C-Trail already has their written requirements. And that was my question, is it
Yeah.
because before you bought in C-Trail, you agreed to these
Sure.
HOA requirements? But and you can't unilaterally enforce them after the fact? Is that our problem?
No, no, no. You can establish these procedures, and that there would be no nonconformities. You would have to establish that there'd be amortization on any violations. I mean, the town has to make a policy decision on
Well,
that.
Ron's question, though, is it appropriate for us to have that as an agenda item?
If the board feels like it is.
Okay.
That's
Well,
the
unless somebody addresses this, it will never
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
And we can't, we have a code enforcement officer who's also the animal control official. That person does not have the time to go around and do this stuff.
But I believe, because I worked on the vegetation ordinance, we had a little committee that worked on that. Some of this, which you're talking to vehicles and stuff, is in there. Now, whether we're enforcing or not, it's a whole different story.
I'm not talking about abandoned vehicles, though, and that's what's addressed.
I don't remember the language, I'd have to read it. There were sections we didn't work on. But we went through that because citizens had these questions concerning vegetation, and that ordinance was changed. And then they hired the code enforcement officer, and he's code enforcing. So I think that's to me, the venue it's supposed to me, it should be done, but so be it.
Perhaps is who the code enforcement officer. Maybe in the meantime, this will go on and let me just volunteer this, and then you guys discuss this. Staff could at least provide to the board, the existing understanding of what the code enforcement provisions are versus kind of this other separate item.
They're non-existent except for abandoned vehicles. and
Except for
that's-
abandoned vehicles. Okay. And so I'm sure you've read them, but this will be something that is
Abandoned and non-registered vehicles.
abandoned and yeah. There
Living in them.
has the potential to be as controversial, believe it or not, as the rezoning the golf courses. So I would just add that because of that, it might be something that you want to not necessarily put on April.
Well, and there's going to be some resistance to this too, because right now, the way we're staffed, I don't mean planning board, I mean town staff, is it's extremely difficult for code enforcement to be proactive. They are reactive. You call up and you say,
There's a reason for that too, unfortunately, because proactive enforcement, if that individual is not truly in tune with their job, results in the town being sued. And so complaint-based enforcement is typically for smaller jurisdictions, what I advise, so that
nobody wants to be the bad guy in the neighborhood either. So it's
look. I wish I knew there is no silver bullet for all this. Code enforcement is a big issue in all of our towns. No one has the time. No one wants to do it, and there's also very little dollars that are typically allocated to do this type of thing.
Right now, there's no violation to code, so maybe we start with the town and see if they're willing to amend the general regs to address this problem. And if, that's
Well, I
route
can,
would think would be
I can see some of the things I brought up. Most of the things are really not going to be agenda items, but they're going to be hopefully on the radar, which is my intent.
Anything else? Oh, yeah, the reason for this picture?
Oh, yeah, what
you
is
could have
that?
That was my addition.
That's what I had sent out. So,
This is a picture of some newly constructed homes on the intersection of 38th Street and North Shore Drive on the island. The house on the left is one of 3 new homes that were constructed and occupied last summer, if I remember correctly. Following the closing of those 3 houses, development started of the house on the right. And there's not a question in my mind that everything is as it should be. However, the house on the left has a 25-foot minimum front yard setback, we know.
They're obviously single
Yeah.
family.
Yeah. The house to the right, which is facing North Shore Drive, has a 12-foot side yard setback requirement because it's a corner lot. So between the two, you've got about a 13-foot distance or something like that. So as you can see, the house on the right is well in front of the house on the left. What doesn't show up very well here is that both houses are using their minimum setbacks. The house on the left is 5 feet from the border. The house on the right is using the 5-foot rear yard. Consequently, the people that have just spent, I don't know, some $700,000 on this house on the left are looking at a huge wall. And boy, I'll tell you, that would bother me if I was doing it. So I'm just wondering, and again, I have no question, but this is compliant, but is there something that we can entertain on corner lots to prevent something like this from happening? I would guess that the guy who built this house on the left knew that another house was going to go in next door to him. He very probably thought it was going to be facing 38th Street, however. And he wouldn't be looking at the back of this thing. So, just, not to be answered today, but that's the reason.
If it were on 38th Street, Tom, wouldn't the house, as you rotate it, just be in line? The fronts would be in line.
Right. Yeah,
instead
the front of that
instead
house
of-
would be
So-
in line with its next door neighbor. It would look wonderful.
But it looks deeper than the house is wide.
In your ordinance, and this is a problem that's come up in other beach towns. In fact, we went through a significant modification in the town of Topsail Beach dealing with this. But in your ordinance, it says specifically under H, the owner of a corner lot shall be required to specify which street line is the front. And so in other communities, not just Topsail Beach, we have, depending on, the pleasure of the community, we've said, the predominant frontage of the street shall be the one in which is, the house shall front upon the predominant, outlaying of the street. So in this case, and I would have to look at this, but I'd imagine that on 38th, the majority of the homes are facing 38th.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so that, yeah, I am very, very familiar with these types of issues. Unfortunately, there's a case to be made for both of these because there's unique situations where the owner wants to have deference to choose which direction they want to go. Obviously, in this case, but in other cases where it doesn't create a conflict similar to this.
Why is the driveway wider than 20 feet on the house on the left?
Don't look at me. I didn't build it.
Well, I also
Well-
think that on the east end, where they built all those houses way out, on the big, huge lots, and they look like a hotel instead of a house, they block the view of the ocean from the people on the east end, as far as looking out at the ocean. And I didn't think you could build a structure that blocked anyone's view.
Yeah, you can't build a fence of a height. It has to be 50%. I mean,
Yeah.
you can build a
Sure can.
house to spec on any lot you want.
The other thing I'll mention about this picture is the house on the right that's under construction has mud that goes halfway across North Shore every day that we get hard rain.
Call Lee Hall.
Anyway, somebody look at that. They've got mud fences on one side, but the other side just goes right into North Shore.
We did address the builder about that.
Yeah, that's the way silt fences are designed, or at least mandated. You have to have an access and egress area, but it's a problem with their approach slab as they
They're just
enter the
filling
street.
the street.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're made some decisions regarding future agenda items. Do we have any further public comments? We do.
This is Bob Forrester, 110 Crooked Gully Circle. I just want to prevail on your time for a few more seconds to commend the board for reaching decisions on the MR3 zone district. I know it's not easy, and but that's why you all get paid the big bucks. But decisions have to be made, and I also wanted to make it clear that the utilization of averages and numbers was to paint a picture, not necessarily an advocate that those were the appropriate sizes to which they must be changed to. But I did want to commend the board for reaching decision, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else there, Bob? Okay. Okay, anyone have anything else? If not, a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Ron nodded a second.
Oh, yeah, second.
All in favor?
Aye.